480 BCE. The Persian Empire controls most of the known world through military conquest and tribute. Greek city-states face invasion from King Xerxes' army, numbering hundreds of thousands strong. Athens sends messengers to Sparta, requesting a military alliance against the approaching Persian forces. Spartan leaders convene in their council chamber, debating whether to commit troops far from home. King Leonidas stands before the elders, arguing for immediate military intervention against Xerxes. The council hesitates, citing religious festivals that forbid Spartan armies from marching during sacred days. Leonidas understands that delay means Greek cities fall before Sparta can mobilize its full military strength. He proposes taking his personal bodyguard of 300 warriors to hold strategic mountain passes. The council grants permission for this limited force, believing it insufficient to stop Persia's advance. Leonidas selects 300 Spartan warriors, each with living sons to continue family bloodlines. These men understand they march towards certain death, defending a narrow pass called Thermopylae. The warriors gather weapons, embrace families, and prepare for a journey they will not return from. Spartan wives watch husbands depart, knowing the city's survival depends on their sacrifice ahead. Leonidas leads his 300 north through Greek territories, seeking the mountain pass location. Allied Greek city-states send small contingents, joining the Spartan force along the northern route. 7,000 Greek soldiers eventually gather at Thermopylae, but Spartans form the disciplined core. The pass sits between mountains and sea, narrow enough that numbers cannot overwhelm defensive positions. Leonidas positions his forces at the narrowest point, where few Persian soldiers can attack simultaneously. Greek scouts return with reports of Persian army camps stretching beyond the visible horizon in every direction. The warriors dig defensive positions, stack stones for barriers, and prepare. For the first assault wave, Persian advance scouts observe the small Greek force blocking the pass through the mountain range Xerxes. Reports describing 300 Spartans exercising and combing their hair before battle preparations. The Persian king laughs. Considering the small force insignificant compared to his massive army's strength, he sends messengers demanding Greek surrender, offering safe passage if they abandon the pass immediately. Leonidas refuses, responding that the Persians must come, take the pass through force, and combat. Xerxes waits 4 days, expecting Greeks to flee when they comprehend the overwhelming numerical disadvantage. The Spartans remain in position, shields locked, spears ready, watching the Persian camps across the terrain. Persian commanders grow impatient, questioning why their king delays attacking such a small defensive force. Xerxes finally orders the first assault, sending 10,000 Median soldiers against the Greek position. The Persians advance in loose formation, carrying wicker shields and short spears toward Spartan lines. Spartan warriors lock shields in a tight phalanx formation, presenting an impenetrable bronze wall to attackers. Persian soldiers crash against the Spartan shield wall, unable to break the disciplined Greek formation. Spartan spears thrust through gaps in shields, killing Persians who cannot reach Greek warriors effectively. Bodies pile at the pass entrance as wave after wave of Persian soldiers attack without success. The narrow terrain prevents the Persians from using their numerical advantage, or flanking the Greek position. Xerxes watches from his throne as thousands of his soldiers die against 300 Spartan warriors. The first day ends with Persian forces retreating, leaving hundreds of dead blocking the pass entrance. Greek warriors rest briefly, tend wounds, and prepare for the next assault they know will come. Persian commanders report massive casualties, with no progress in breaking through the small Greek defensive line. Xerxes grows furious, demanding his elite troops crush the Greeks and open the pass immediately. He sends his immortals, the Persian Empire's most feared and disciplined soldiers, against Spartan positions. The immortals advance, in tight formation, carrying better armor and weapons than previous assault waves. Spartan warriors brace for impact as elite Persian soldiers reach their shield wall with a coordinated attack. The immortals strike hard, testing Spartan discipline with sustained pressure against the defensive formation line. Spartan warriors hold position, rotating fresh soldiers forward, while exhausted fighters rest behind the front lines. The coordinated rotation maintains constant pressure while preventing fatigue from weakening. The shield wall's integrity. Persian immortals die by hundreds, unable to break Spartan discipline despite superior numbers and equipment. Xerxes stands from his throne 3 times during the battle, shocked at his elite force's failure. The immortals retreat at nightfall, having achieved nothing except adding more bodies to the pass. 2 days of fighting leave heavy Persian casualties while Spartan casualties remain surprisingly minimal overall. Greek allied forces watch in amazement as 3 Spartans hold back the entire Persian army. Persian commanders convene emergency meetings, seeking strategies to overcome the seemingly invincible Greek defensive position. A Greek trader named Ephialtes approaches Persian camp, offering information about a hidden mountain path around Thermopylae. Leads Persian officers to a goat trail through the mountains, bypassing the defended pass completely. Xerxes orders his immortals to march through the mountain path, surrounding Greek forces from behind positions. Greek scouts positioned on the mountain path detect Persian movement through the trail during night hours. Rus to warn Leonidas that Persian forces will soon encircle the entire Greek army's position. Leonidas gathers his commanders, explaining that remaining means certain death from the front and rear simultaneously. He orders allied Greek forces to retreat immediately, preserving their armies for future battles against Persia. The allied commanders protest, arguing they should all stand together and fight to the last man. Leonidas insists Sparta's 300 will hold the pass alone, buying time for others to escape. Allied Greek soldiers withdraw reluctantly, leaving only 300 Spartans and 700 Thespian volunteers remaining. The Thespians refuse to abandon Spartans, choosing death over the shame of fleeing from certain battle. Leonidas positions his reduced force to defend against attacks from both front and rear directions simultaneously. Dawn breaks, with Persian immortals emerging from the mountain path behind the Greek defensive position now. Xerxes orders a massive assault from both directions, intending to crush the remaining Greeks between converging forces. Spartan warriors abandon their defensive phalanx, forming a circular formation to face attacks from all sides. Persian arrows darken the sky, falling like rain on the surrounded Greek warriors fighting desperately below. Leonidas falls early, struck by multiple arrows while leading a charge against Persian forces pressing forward. Spartans fight over his body, preventing the Persians from claiming their king's corpse as a trophy prize. The battle devolves into brutal combat as Greeks and Persians clash over the fallen king. 4 times, Spartans recapture Leonidas' body from Persian soldiers attempting to seize the royal corpse. Persian numbers finally overwhelm the defensive circle as Greeks fight with broken spears and bare hands. The last Spartans die on a small hill, surrounded by Persian dead stacked 3 deep around their position. Thespian volunteers fight alongside Spartans until the final man falls. Refusing surrender or flight from battle, Xerxes walks through the battlefield afterward, observing thousands of Persian corpses surrounding 300 Greek bodies. He orders Leonidas' body decapitated and crucified, displaying unusual rage toward the fallen Spartan king specifically. Persian soldiers marvel at the dead Spartans' discipline, noting they died in perfect formation even in defeat. Greek slaves in the Persian army witness the aftermath, whispering about 300 men holding back an empire. News of Thermopylae spreads through Greek cities, transforming the defeat into a rallying cry for resistance. Athens evacuates its population to nearby islands, preparing to resist Persian invasion with renewed determination now. Spartan warriors sacrifice buys critical time for Greek forces to organize and prepare defensive strategies effectively. The Battle of Thermopylae becomes a story that Greeks tell to remember courage against impossible odds. But Persian scribes record the battle differently, minimizing Spartan resistance in official imperial historical records. Xerxes orders historians to downplay Greek resistance, portraying the battle as a minor skirmish, barely worth mentioning. Persian accounts describe 300 rebels blocking a road, quickly swept aside by the empire's might. The true scale of Persian casualties disappears from official records, maintained by the empire's scribes and historians. Greek oral tradition preserves the story, passing down details through generations, despite lacking written historical documentation. Spartan mothers tell sons about the 300 who died defending Greece against overwhelming Persian forces. The story evolves through adding mythological elements while maintaining the core narrative of sacrifice displayed. But certain details begin disappearing from Greek accounts as centuries pass and political dynamics shift regionally. Later, Greek historians emphasize Spartan military prowess while minimizing contributions from Thespian and other allied forces. The 700 Thespians who died alongside Spartans gradually fade from popular retellings of the battle. Leonidas becomes the singular hero while his 300 warriors blend into an anonymous collective mass. The complex political negotiations preceding the battle disappear, replaced by simplified narratives of Spartan bravery alone. Later, Roman historians studying the battle focus exclusively on military tactics, ignoring broader strategic contexts entirely. Persian sources remain largely ignored by Western scholars translating and preserve ancient historical texts systematically. The battle transforms from a complex historical event into a simplified morality tale about courage against impossible odds. Medieval European scholars embraced the Thermopylae story as an example of Christian virtue and righteous sacrifice. They reshaped the narrative to emphasize themes of noble death for the greater good and heavenly reward. The actual religious and political motivations of Spartans fade behind layers of later Christian interpretive frameworks. Renaissance artists depict the battle with idealized classical aesthetics, creating images divorced from historical reality completely. Spartan warriors become marble statues rather than actual humans who fought, bled, and died in chaotic combat. The battle's political complexity disappears beneath romantic notions of heroic last stands against tyrannical empires threatening. 19th century European empires used Thermopylae to justify colonial expansion, a defensive civilization against barbarism. British scholars particularly emphasize the battle when teaching imperial subjects about Western civilization's superiority and destiny. The Spartans become symbols of European racial and cultural supremacy in academic texts distributed throughout colonies. Greek allies disappear entirely from these accounts, leaving only Spartans as defenders of Western civilization's birthplace. The Persian Empire transforms from a complex political entity into a monolithic Oriental despotism, threatening European cultural heritage specifically. 20th century historians began questioning traditional narratives, seeking Persian sources and archaeological evidence for verification purposes. They discover massive discrepancies between popular accounts and actual historical records from multiple ancient civilizations involved. Persian casualty numbers were likely exaggerated in Greek sources to amplify the glory of Spartan resistance achieved. The 300 Spartans had significant support from allied Greek forces, whose contributions were systematically minimized afterward. Leonidas' decision to stay involved complex political calculations about Spartan prestige and religious obligations, not pure heroism. Modern scholars recognize the battle's importance while acknowledging that centuries of mythologization distorted the actual historical events significantly, but popular culture continues to repeat simplified versions, removing complexity in favor of inspirational, heroic narratives. Instead, films, books, and games present Thermopylae as a simple story of good versus evil, freedom versus tyranny. The actual Spartans practiced slavery, oppressed neighboring populations, and maintained brutal social hierarchies internally at home. These uncomfortable facts disappear from popular retellings focused on celebrating Spartan courage and martial excellence exclusively. The battle becomes mythology rather than history, serving present political purposes instead of understanding past realities. Each generation reshapes Thermopylae to reflect contemporary values and concerns, erasing inconvenient historical details progressively over time. What remains is a story everybody knows, but few understand in its actual historical context and complexity. The real Leonidas and his 300 warriors disappear behind centuries of political manipulation and cultural appropriation. Their actual motivations, fears, and decisions become unknowable, buried beneath layers of mythological reinterpretation and propaganda. The battle they fought becomes the battle we needed them to fight for our own purposes. History erases itself through retelling, each generation believing they finally possess the true, authentic story at last. But the truth remains buried at Thermopylae, where 300 men died for reasons we can only guess. The erasure begins immediately after the battle ends. At Thermopylae's blood-soaked pass, Persian scribes in Xerxes' camp write official accounts, minimizing Greek resistance and Persian casualties sustained. They describe a brief skirmish against bandits blocking a mountain road. Nothing more significant than that. The massive Persian casualties embarrass the empire, threatening Xerxes' reputation. As an invincible divine ruler, orders go out to minimize the battle in all official correspondence sent throughout the vast empire. provincial governors received instructions to suppress any stories glorifying Greek resistance against Persian imperial forces. Greek slaves who witnessed the battle are forbidden from speaking about what they saw under threat. Some disappear entirely, silenced permanently to prevent embarrassing truths from spreading through slave networks underground. Persian soldiers, returning home, tell different stories in taverns and markets, despite official censorship attempts. They describe fighting men who refused to break, who died standing rather than retreating from battle. Military commanders privately acknowledged that the battle revealed weaknesses in Persian tactics and troop discipline compared to the Greeks. But, publicly, they repeat the official narrative of an insignificant roadblock quickly cleared by superior forces. Xerxes advances into Greece, burning Athens, but failing to destroy the Greek navy at Salamis afterward. The naval defeat forces Persian withdrawal from Greece, ending the invasion that Thermopylae had delayed critically. Persian historians, later writing about the campaign, mentioned Thermopylae only in passing, a footnote to larger events. The 300 Spartans who delayed an empire became a minor detail in the Persian historical records maintained. Meanwhile, in Greece, the story spreads rapidly through oral tradition and poetic compositions celebrating Spartan sacrifice. The poet Simonides composed an epitaph for the Spartan dead, inscribed on stone at the battle site. Go tell the Spartans, stranger passing by, that here obedient to their laws we lie. The inscription reads, the epitaph emphasizes obedience to Spartan law rather than individual heroism or military prowess displayed in combat. This framing serves Sparta's political interests, reinforcing state authority over individual ambition within their rigid society. Spartan leaders use Thermopylae to justify their militaristic social system and brutal training regimens for warriors. The battle becomes propaganda demonstrating why Sparta needs absolute discipline, total obedience, and constant military readiness. Other aspects of the battle receive less emphasis in Spartan retellings shared with neighboring Greek cities. The 700 Thespian volunteers who died alongside Spartans rarely appear in Spartan accounts of the battle. Their sacrifice complicates the narrative of unique Spartan military excellence and racial superiority over other Greeks. Spartans' leadership prefers stories emphasizing their warriors' exceptional qualities rather than shared Greek courage and resistance. The Thespians gradually fade from official commemorations, remembered only in their own city's local historical traditions. Athens produces its own version of events, emphasizing Athenian leadership in coordinating Greek resistance against Persia. Athenian historians note that Sparta's religious obligations prevented full mobilization during Greece's greatest crisis moment. They suggest Spartan reluctance to help Athens reveals underlying political tensions and self-interest over genuine Panhellenic unity. The 300 become both heroes and examples of Spartan political calculation disguised as religious duty. Each Greek city-state shapes the Thermopylae narrative to serve its own political agendas and territorial ambitions. The battle's meaning shifts depending on who tells the story and what political point they need to prove. Decades pass. The generation that fought at Thermopylae dies, replaced by children who know only stories heard, second-hand details, change or disappear entirely as memory gives way to legend and political utility over accuracy. A Spartan warrior's red cloak becomes symbolic shorthand for all Spartans, though equipment varied significantly. Actually, the formation tactics grow more elaborate and transforming practical battlefield movements into choreographed perfection beyond reality. Leonidas's defiant responses to Persian demands become more quota vele and likely invented decades after the actual conversations. The famous reply, "Come and take them," when Xerxes demands Greek weapons, possibly never happened as reported. But the quote serves Greek propaganda, demonstrating Spartan fearlessness and contempt for Persian threats and intimidation. Historians begin questioning which details are accurate and which serve political or cultural purposes instead of the truth. The questions themselves become dangerous as powerful city-states protect their preferred versions of glorious past events. Scholars who suggest Thermopylae was less heroic than claimed face accusations of dishonoring the dead warriors. Some lose teaching positions or face exile for challenging official narratives promoted by Spartan and Athenian authorities. The battle becomes untouchable beyond critical examination, a sacred founding myth rather than a historical event to analyze. Centuries pass. Alexander the Great conquered Persia, destroying the empire that once threatened Greek independence and cultural survival. battle. He visits Thermopylae, paying respects to Leonidas' memory while pursuing his own imperial ambitions through Asia. The battle becomes a symbol Alexander uses to justify the Macedonian conquest as revenge for earlier Persian invasions. This reframing erases the complex political dynamics between Greek city-states during and after the Persian Wars. Alexander's historians emphasize Greek unity against Persian barbarism, ignoring centuries of Greek civil wars and internal conflicts. Thermopylae serves Macedonian propaganda, transforming a defensive stand into a justification for aggressive, imperial expansion eastward. The Spartans who died defending their homeland become symbols for conquering someone else's homeland instead. Roman historians later studied Greek military campaigns, seeking lessons for their own imperial military strategies and tactics. They focus exclusively on tactical elements, analyzing phalanx formations and defensive positioning in narrow terrain constraints. The political, religious, and cultural contexts disappear from Roman military discussing the battle's strategic significance. Thermopylae becomes a case study in military science, stripped of human complexity and transformed into abstract tactics. Roman generals cite the battle when defending mountain passes or narrow defiles against numerically superior enemies attacking, but they ignore Leonidas' political calculations and the battle's role in broader Greek resistance strategies employed systematically. The 300 warriors become units in a military equation, rather than men making desperate choices in chaos. Christianity spreads through the Roman Empire, bringing new interpretive frameworks to ancient Greek historical events and heroes. Christian scholars reinterpret pagan Greek battles as foreshadowing Christian values of sacrifice and martyrdom for truth. Leonidas becomes a proto-Christian figure, dying nobly for others despite lacking knowledge of Christ's later sacrifice. The actual Spartan religious beliefs and motivations get replaced with Christian theological concepts imposed retroactively onto history. Medieval monks copying ancient manuscripts added Christian commentary to Greek texts describing the Thermopylae battle events. Their annotations guide readers to see Christian virtue in pagan military actions. Baptizing ancient Greece retroactively, details contradicting Christian interpretations disappear during copying as scribes correct texts to align with theology properly. Sparta's brutal treatment of helots, the enslaved population supporting Spartan military society, vanishes from monastery manuscripts. The Spartan practice of infanticide, killing weak or disabled babies, gets omitted from medieval accounts entirely. Sparta's extreme militarism and suppression of individual freedom contradict Christian values, so monks simply erase them. What survives is a sanitized version, emphasizing only those elements compatible with medieval Christian morality and ethics. The Renaissance rediscovers ancient texts, seeking authentic classical sources, uncorrupted by medieval Christian interpretation and censorship. Scholars compare different manuscripts, discovering centuries of alterations, omissions, and additions made by various copyists. Intentionally, they attempt to reconstruct original versions but find the texts have been modified so extensively that the originals are lost. Every surviving manuscript reflects someone's political, religious, or cultural agenda imposed on the ancient historical narrative. The search for authentic Thermopylae leads scholars back to contradictory sources serving different ancient political purposes. They realize the truth about the battle may be fundamentally unknowable given the layers of manipulation over millennia, but European powers building colonial empires need Thermopylae as a founding myth of Western civilization's superiority. British scholars particularly emphasize the battle when teaching colonial subjects about Europe's inherent martial excellence and destiny. They compare Spartans at Thermopylae, 2 British soldiers defending colonial outposts against savage native populations attacking Greeks, became white Europeans avant la lettre, defending civilization against Asian barbarism threatening Western cultural heritage. This racial interpretation ignores that ancient Greeks would not have recognized modern European racial categories at all. Spartans saw themselves as Greek, distinct from other Greeks, not as representatives of European racial identity, but colonial educators need Thermopylae to justify European domination of non-European peoples across global empire territories. The battle becomes evidence of inherent Western military and cultural superiority over Eastern despotism and weakness. The Persian Empire transforms from a complex multi-ethnic civilization into a monolithic Oriental enemy representing everything anti-Western and barbaric. This interpretation serves British, French, and German colonial projects requiring historical justification for conquering inferior peoples. Thermopylae appears in colonial textbooks from India to Africa, teaching conquered populations about their conquerors' glorious heritage. The message: resistance is futile because Europeans possess inherent superiority, demonstrated continuously since ancient times. The 20th century arrived with world wars shattering European confidence in civilizational superiority and inevitable historical progress. Scholars begin questioning nationalist and racist interpretations of ancient history that justified imperial conquest and oppression. They examine Persian sources previously ignored by Western academics who assumed Greek accounts were automatically more reliable. Persian records reveal a different battle, still significant but without the dramatic details Greek sources claim occurred. Archaeological evidence at Thermopylae suggests a smaller engagement than traditional accounts describe in terms of total forces. The millions in Xerxes' army were likely tens of thousands, still formidable, but not impossibly large as the Greeks claimed. Greek casualty numbers may have been minimized while Persian losses were wildly exaggerated to amplify Spartan achievement dramatically. The battle's military significance was real, but perhaps less decisive than centuries of Greek and Western interpretation suggested. These scholarly findings reach academic journals but rarely penetrate popular culture, still attached to heroic narratives learned. Films, novels, and video games continue to present Thermopylae as 300 supermen against 1,000,000 mindless enemies. The simplified narrative proves more marketable than the complex historical reality involving political calculation and strategic coordination. Among allies, comic books and graphic novels present hypermasculine Spartans as idealized warriors fighting for freedom against tyrannical oppression. These modern retellings often include racist and orientalist imagery depicting Persians as monsters rather than human soldiers. Xerxes becomes an effeminate, jewelry-wearing tyrant in contrast to masculine, austere Spartans defending Western values and freedom. The historical Xerxes, a skilled administrator managing a vast multi-ethnic empire, disappears behind racist caricature and propaganda. Spartan slavery, oppression of women, and institutionalized pederasty vanished from popular retellings focused exclusively on military prowess. The actual Sparta, a deeply authoritarian and violent society, becomes a symbol of freedom and democratic resistance. Modern white supremacist groups adopt Spartan imagery, seeing the battle as a racial conflict between the West and East. They ignore that ancient Greeks would not have recognized modern racial categories or white identity at all. The 300 become symbols for contemporary political movements, completely divorced from historical context and accuracy. Meanwhile, Greek and Iranian scholars debate the battles, meaning each claiming different interpretations serve national pride properly. Greek nationalists emphasize the battle when asserting cultural superiority over Turkey and other regional rivals in geopolitics. Iranian scholars note that Cyrus the Great freed Jewish slaves while Spartans brutally oppressed helots for centuries. They question why Western culture celebrates Spartan militarism while demonizing Persian civilization's actual historical accomplishments and contributions. The debate reveals how Thermopylae remains a contested site of cultural memory rather than a settled historical fact. Each generation, each nation, each political movement reshapes the battle to serve present needs and ideological agendas. The real warriors who fought and died disappear behind layers of interpretation, appropriation, and deliberate historical manipulation. What they actually believed, feared, and hoped for becomes unknowable, buried under centuries of myth-making and propaganda. Historians today acknowledge they cannot recover the true Thermopylae because all sources serve political purposes from creation. Even attempting to strip away later editions reveals older editions serving earlier political agendas, layered throughout available sources. The battle exists now primarily as a mirror, reflecting whoever tells the story and what they need history to prove. Spartan warriors fighting at Thermopylae become whatever we need them to be for our contemporary political and cultural purposes. They defend freedom or embody militarism, represent heroism or foolish waste, symbolize unity or demonstrate cynical political calculation. The meaning shifts, transforms, and adapts to each era's concerns while claiming to reveal timeless, universal human truths. But perhaps the only truth is that we've lost the truth. If it ever existed in recoverable form, 300 men died in a mountain pass ago for reasons we can only guess at now. Everything else is projection, interpretation, and politically motivated narrative. Construction disguised as historical fact and objective analysis. The history they erased was not erased by a single conspiracy or deliberate cover-up orchestrated by powerful authorities. It was erased gradually through countless each removing or adding details to serve immediate purposes and needs. It was erased by scholars who prioritized some sources over others, based on unstated assumptions about civilizational superiority. It was erased by translators who chose which texts to preserve and which to let disappear into obscurity. It was erased by teachers who simplified complex events into lessons about courage, freedom, or military excellence. Exclusively, it was erased by artists who created images that replaced actual historical memory with aesthetic idealization and myth. It was erased by politicians who needed inspiring origin stories to justify present-day policies and imperial ambitions abroad. The erasure continues today as each new retelling claims to finally reveal the real Thermopylae at last, but we are still erasing, still simplifying, still serving our own agendas with other people's deaths and sacrifices. The real Leonidas and his 300 warriors remain buried at Thermopylae, beyond our reach now. What we have instead is what we've always had. Stories we tell ourselves about who we are, and history, once again, disappears beneath the weight of what we need it to mean for us.